Can you hear me all right? My name is Seth Bullard. I work over at the Public Defender's Office. I mainly work over in that courthouse just down the street. What I'm really here to do is to teach y'all a little bit about your rights, but also to hopefully prevent unnecessary criminal charges that result from misunderstandings and lack of knowledge. So I'm going to kind of talk about the police or police encounters here and what your rights are if you are ever encountered or approached or stopped by the police. So there are 3 different types of police encounters. Does anyone know what those types of encounters might be? Raise your hand. Well, I haven't told you yet, so I'll go ahead and tell you. There's consensual encounters, like conversations. Police can, just like any other person, can come up to you and ask to talk to you, ask you questions, or just chat. And there's nothing you can do about that except politely walk away if you don't want to talk to them. It's very basic, very simple. Obviously, they have a badge on them and look scary, but they're human beings just like you and me. And I think it's important to remember that when dealing with police or anyone, that you remember that first and foremost, that you're dealing with human beings and also a badge. Second type of police encounter is a detention. So detention, more than a conversation, you've got what we call the Fourth Amendment now is implicated, but it's not as much as an arrest. So an arrest obviously is our last type of encounter, and that's when you're in handcuffs, you're in the back of the squad car, or you're down at the station. You kind of know when you're arrested, I would say. But there can be some gray area. What is, am I detained? Am I arrested? The good news is you can ask the police officer these questions, and the police officer will need to respond truthfully in that case. Here's a question: Can police officers lie to you on the street? That's true. That's true. I'm not saying police officers make a point to lie, but certainly they can shade things and to help with their investigation. But from your perspective, that could mean that that you need to know your rights. You need to know what am I allowed to, or what am I allowed to do, what am I not allowed to do when having this interaction with the police. Number one thing is you do not have to answer questions. You have a right under the Fifth Amendment. I'm sure y'all have heard plead the Fifth. That doesn't just apply in the courtroom. Nobody in this country is required to give evidence that can later be used to prosecute them. You never have to give evidence against yourself. And I certainly hope none of you in this room are ever in a position where you're doing anything wrong or you have some drugs or alcohol or something illegal. But in any event, regardless of that, you do not have to give evidence against yourself. And what that further extends to is if you're stopped in your car, if you're stopped on the street, you do not have to consent to a search. However, there's a little bit of a gray area here. It's something called a Terry frisk or a Terry search, which is a search based on reasonable suspicion rather than based on probable cause. So probable cause is the higher standard that they need to search you, which is, that in their training and experience, they have probable cause to believe criminal activity is afoot. Reasonable suspicion in the Terry frisk is simply for the officer's safety. It's a frisk for weapons, and it can either be an in-person frisk or it can be in the car if you're pulled over in a traffic stop. They can search the car for weapons. But here, let me ask you this. Let's say they stop you in the car, they want to search the car for weapons, and then they go into a glove compartment, pull out a little pill bottle, and then open it up, and it's got some marijuana in it. What then? Are they allowed to use that marijuana against you in court?
Yes.
In fact, no. And here's the only reason why. Because can a weapon fit in a little pill bottle? No, it cannot. So they can search for weapons, but only places where weapons could possibly be, right? So when they have opened up that pill bottle, they have violated your rights, and you can then have that evidence suppressed in court by a lawyer like me. And that's really what I do, is I come in after the fact and make sure that everything was on the up and up. And yes, sir.
So you're saying, if you're checking for a gun, you find marijuana, you ain't gonna get in trouble with that?
No, what I'm saying is, if you find marijuana in a shoebox, say a shoebox is big enough to hold a gun, right? So if they're doing a legitimate Terry frisk for weapons, and then they find this shoebox, they open it up, it doesn't have a gun, but it has marijuana, then they can use that. But because, yes ma'am?
So do you have to get a permission to be able to search, or how would they say, I want to search your car for guns?
They would say guns and weapons.
And I say, no, I don't want to search my car, I got to go somewhere.
Yeah, that's typically what I would say. With the Terry frisk,
They still can do it?
they can do it in a situation if they can articulate reasonable suspicion to a court that this person, that you might be armed and dangerous. Now, if you're just walking down the road, I don't see any reasonable suspicion there. And typically you wouldn't be searched, but it's, you know, when we have these late nights or, well, who knows why, frankly. I mean, and certainly I've challenged Terry frisk, those basic weapons frisk and won. So it's possible for officers to even go beyond the pale in those situations. But generally they can do a pat down for weapons. But what they cannot do is go into that pocket. They cannot go into, they can't search you. They can pat you down, but they cannot search you without your permission. And this is what officers will frequently do. They say, you don't mind if I search you, right? You don't have anything on you. You don't mind, right? You're not trying to hide anything. You know, we've been taught since we were children that, if you're clamming up, that makes you look suspicious. And maybe it does, but, frankly, you have rights, and you've got to assert them. If you don't use them, you lose them. And so to simply politely say, I'm not comfortable with you searching me right now, and thank you very much. And that's it. Oh, I need to speak up. Yeah, so it's all about being polite. It's not about, oh, I know these things, no, it's about taking a police encounter and not letting it go to a place that's worse. So many of the charges that we see, I was talking to Desmond a little bit about this, are these resisting a public officer charge. These are very tough charges to beat, and a lot of times they arise for no good reason at all. You'll have an encounter with the police, and people don't know their rights, and it goes back and forth, and then the police starting to detain you, put you in handcuffs, and somebody wriggle a little bit, that's a new charge. That's called resist, obstruct, or delay, and it's a very broad charge that nobody needs to ever get a resist, obstruct, or delay charge. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is to teach you, what can you say, what words can you use rather than actions in that moment. One of the main things you could say, and the officer's got to answer truthfully here, is, do I have to? Can I search your car? Do I have to? So the officers can lie, they can't shade the truth, but when it comes to the law and your constitutional rights, an officer cannot lie about that. So it's as simple as that. Do I have to? You'll have to bear with me. This is the first time I've done this solo, so let's see.
You a public defender?
Yes, ma'am. And y'all feel free to chime in with questions. This is kind of what I want to.
Can you do some role play when you kind of tell these?
Sure. Somebody want to?
What you said?
Yeah. Here, why don't? Will you stand up? All right. You're gonna play the police officer, and I'm gonna be the guy that you're gonna detain. Okay. Let's. So tell me I'm being detained and start handcuffing me. You said it. Here, y'all can go through the cops. So it's a show of force right now. I got 2 cops here.
Okay, y'all listen.
All right, so what about
You resting. You being detained?
Well, why am I being detained, man? What have I done? I haven't done anything. That's a new charge. Maybe I hadn't done anything.
Is this an arrest?
Pardon me?
You was in arrest.
Yeah, that's right. That's resist. I mean, it is what it is.
Y'all see that?
You know. So yeah, even if I can beat your underlying charge, which I frequently can, that resists. That's not beatable. So it's totally preventable, and hope it doesn't happen anymore, because we see way too many resist charges, and it's just sad because you're not going to prison over that, but you can have a record, and it's just not good. All right.
How many days in jail for that?
You can get up to 60.
6 weeks?
60 days in jail. Depending on your record.
60 days in jail.
Or is this an arrest?
Potentially. I mean, again, it's yeah. That would be the word.
Is that a felony or a misdemeanor?
It's a misdemeanor.
Say that better not be.
So yeah.
Y'all lost your job, y'all go to jail.
Okay. So here are a couple of exceptions. So y'all have heard of search warrants before, right? Is everybody familiar with this idea? So the search warrant was invented back when they were creating this country in the 1700s, because in England they were issuing these general warrants where the king or his governors would issue these things, and the British soldiers would come in and search everything. There wouldn't be any specificity as to what are we looking for. And so our founding fathers said, no, that's not cool. They were really upset about that. So the search warrant has to be specific as to what is being looked for, and it has to be issued by a neutral and detached judicial official. So not a police officer. And so theoretically, that's what could happen if you refuse, consent to search. The officer could go, based on probable cause, swear out a search warrant with the magistrate. In practice, in the traffic stop, it's typically not going to happen. So you can assert your rights all day long, and then you make the officers do their job. If they want to search your car, go through the proper steps, but you do not have to make that job any easier for them. And you're not being rude by doing that. You can be, you shouldn't be, but I mean, obviously there are ways to talk to officers that would be rude and would be wrong in all ways, shapes, and forms. What I'm trying to tell you here is not to, be a know-it-all, but just to be polite but firm in asserting your God-given rights, frankly. All right. One of the exceptions to the warrant requirement is plain view doctrine. So let's say I'm driving down the road. I get pulled over for speeding. And then the officer comes up to the car, says license registration, he looks there on the seat, and he sees the marijuana. Can he then go and search my car? Absolutely. Yes, he can. You're right. He can do it. This is plain view exception, because if he can say, oh, that's marijuana, I have probable cause to believe that, then he can search for more drugs or whatnot in the car, and whatever he finds can be used against you. So plain view is a very common exception to the warrant requirement. Now, North Carolina is a little, yes ma'am?
How about if they smell it?
Yes, plain smell. It's the same. It's the same deal. And obviously with marijuana, that's what we're talking about. Yeah, that's the one drug that has a unique odor. So, oh yes, North Carolina is a little unique and kind of nice in this way, in that we have an inadvertency requirement to the plain view doctrine. So the Constitution itself sets a floor, meaning that on the federal level, as long as an officer is in a place where they have a legal right to be, and they see something in plain view, then they can go ahead and search. That means an officer could set up on a hill with a telescope, look through the window, But here in North Carolina, that is not allowed. I mean, the feds could do it if they wanted to try you in federal court, but in my courthouse, that is not allowed.
It's like stalking somebody.
That's right. Yeah, we can't do that here in North Carolina. The police can't do that here. So, let's see what else.
What if you smell it and there's nothing in there?
If you smell it and there's nothing in there?
Yeah, like you throw it out the window before you come in.
Oh, I see. I'll tell you, that doesn't work too often. I would say, I don't know. Yeah.
Next time they gonna fight.
Yeah. Just, let's see. So after the arrest, I mean, if it gets to that point, you then talk about the Fourth Amendment, you talk about the Fifth Amendment, now let's talk about the Sixth Amendment. You have a Sixth Amendment right to a lawyer. I'm sure everybody's heard the Miranda warnings, right? You have the right to remain silent in anything you say, et cetera, et cetera. Let me ask y'all a question. Anybody know the answer to this? If a cop fails to read you your Miranda warnings,
He can't arrest you.
he can't arrest you. Wrong. Wrong. Unfortunately, that is the biggest misconception I see. It's rare, in fact, to have someone. Pardon? It's rare to have someone, an officer read Miranda warnings, because if the officer is seeing the marijuana in plain view, he doesn't need your statement to prove that in court, right? He's seen it. It was in your car. He doesn't need you to confess to it. But if he wanted that confession, he would have to Mirandize you, right? So what Miranda is contemplating is the talking part. It's the interrogation, and specifically custodial interrogation, meaning Miranda only applies after you have been arrested, okay? In the case itself, back in the 60s, it came from Arizona, and the guy was in the police station, like you've seen the movies, sitting in the room being interrogated. So that's really what it's talking about. It's not talking about street encounters. So that's a important thing to know. Let's see what else. Okay, but here's what I would say as a lawyer, the thing that is most frustrating is when I get to court and somebody has just already chirped and chirped and chirped and given all this evidence to the officer on scene, that you don't have to do that. I mean, that's just what people have to understand. That is not a requirement and cannot be held against you. It may make the officer a little suspicious, and you got to use a judgment call given the situation. But as far as the court system is concerned, that clamming up, that refusal to cooperate with the investigation into yourself is, you cannot have that held against you in any way, shape, or form. So I think that's an important thing to know, that be polite, but be firm. Do not give them evidence that they can use. Let's see, so I think I've gone over everything. I kind of went out of order, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, let me ask, let's talk about this. So, can you record an officer with your cell phone?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
I think on your
Sure, yeah, the First Amendment, right? You can do what you want with your cell phone, but you cannot get up in their face and impede in their investigation. That could also lead to a resist, delay, or obstruct officer charge. I guess that would fall under the obstruct part. Or the delay. Like I say, this is such a broad statute. But you can film the officer from a good distance, or a few feet at least. Most of these officers nowadays have body cameras as well, so that's been helpful, at least in my job, is we get to see exactly what went down in this encounter. And it runs the gamut, but so many encounters go from just minor, like, it's just going to give you a warning for a tag, and they escalate because people don't know their rights. People just, and so, yes sir?
Or would they put something over it so they won't show what they did?
Put something over the camera? Well, if they did that, I'd get that case thrown out. I'm not yet seeing that happen. you know, these officers are you know, they want to keep their jobs. You know, they know they're under a microscope, and I think they're generally going to treat you with respect, but they certainly will demand. You're more likely to be treated with respect if you treat them with respect. Put it that way. Let's see what else. Yes. So the last two are the kind of the thing I'll leave you with are the questions. Do I have to? That's always a good thing to say to a police officer when he asks you something or tells you something. Am I free to leave? That goes back to the consensual stop versus the detention. If you want to know whether you're arrested, detained, or you can go, just ask. Just ask. Am I arrested at this point? Am I detained? You know, and oftentimes that can even help. Those questions can help us in the courtroom. It's like, well, the officer said he was arrested, and then began to ask him questions without Miranda, right? So that would, those questions, any of your responses would be thrown out. And we only know that because that's what the officer had said on the camera. Otherwise, we'd have to litigate that issue, and who knows what would happen. All right. Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
In what cases do I need to provide ID, identification?
So if you're driving a car, you do have to provide an ID card.
If I'm walking in the street?
If you're walking down the street, no, you do not have to do that. I believe you've got to tell them your name. Can you jump in? Yeah, you got to tell them your name. Okay. I should know this better, but
Address?
Say no, just the name.
Just the name?
Yeah. And you don't, because the thing that's obviously worrisome is, you know, running it for warrants and you checking that. And so if you're not detained or stopped, you do not have to tell them more than just your name. Okay. But if you are driving, you've got to provide them ID. And if it's like for younger children as well, there's some curfew laws that I'm not that familiar with where you actually have to provide a little bit more, but I won't get into that. That's not important. Yes.
These boys are reactionary just because of their ages.
That was it.
Their reaction, and someone in the suburbs, someone that's in the suburbs, they all, because of their ages, are reactionary. These boys, how they react to the police is the police officer's first concern. How can they, I'm a product of the civil rights movement, so nonviolent. How are the policemen taught to respond to this 14-year-old boy and a 14-year-old boy somewhere else? I mean, it's the same reaction, and it comes down to we all look alike. That's
I mean, I'm sure you've heard of this term implicit bias, and you know, it doesn't. You watch the news, and obviously, what do you see so many, you know, young black men, you know, in chains on the news, and that's filtered down into the culture, and it pervades everyone, police included. And I mean, it's a shame, but it's reality. So I mean,
so if I may suggest, you know, that in talking to these boys and other boys, it could be more, it could be personally or prepared to be directed more to where they are, and not only where they are. I saw this on TV, I have to share it. Snoop Dogg, everybody heard of Snoop Dogg. His daughter, in their community, suffered racist attacks. Snoop Dogg's daughter. So, you know, the program should be designed just a little bit more for our boys here, as well as Snoop Dogg's daughter, because it says we all look alike, regardless of the community.
yeah. And I guess there's limits to really how much I can even speak to that subject. I wish you Tucson were here. I mean,
And see, well, part of that is establishing the law. Creating the law group is going to be more implementation this afternoon. So they're going to touch on more how it does apply.
I need to sit outside. Just,
No, that's
how about that?
no.
It works. It works.
But that's good. Steph is going to give us the law. They're going to give us the implementation of how it affects people of color and other people.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, hey, guys, role play.
All right, somebody will.
Let's role play. I'm a role play, I'm visual.
Okay.
Let's get him.
You've been
Come on,
volunteered.
you've been volunteered by mama. Come on, come on. Come on. I know, that's how you gotta do it, Coach. This how it happens. Oh, you resisting the rest? What? Okay, listen though. No, this is what I'm trying to tell you. Cops trying to stop you. They say, hey, son. But that's what you do. That's your first reaction, right? Because you're trying to get away. Okay, so but what you leave what you leave for the police to do? What you leave open for the police to do?
I don't know. I never been in this situation.
That's why you're learning. You got to know your powers.
I was
You got to know your powers. You don't have to say something. You're done. You don't like somebody just like let's go right there. So what you doing? Sir, that's why you're done.
Oh no, girl.
He's going to jail. That thing out. So tell him what he should have done.
Yeah, so,
Tell him what he should have done.
sir, may I talk to you for a minute?
Listen.
Do I have to? Yeah, That's all you got. Do I have to? That's 4 words. It's either yes or no. And if it's yes, go ahead and talk to him. If the answer is yes, but then the lawyer looks back later and in fact the answer should have been no, then whatever happens after that, you don't have to worry about it. You know? Yeah. So I'm just going to finish on this with a quick little quiz. If y'all don't take anything from this, I want y'all to remember the basics of the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Anybody can give me the takeaway line from the 4th Amendment? Anybody? That's okay, I'll tell you. To search, yes sir.
I'm sorry. I have
Okay, go
like
ahead.
when you Miranda, like
Speak up.
when you what's that M word that you say?
Mirandize?
Yeah, when you doing that to somebody and you say we have a right to like remain silent and
Yeah.
stuff like that, what's the consequences if you don't like do that?
If you don't remain silent?
Yeah, like
Depends on what you say, right? if you say, I'm going to waive that and I'm going to go ahead and admit to the bank robbery, then the consequences are they got a real good piece of evidence against you, your confession. So yeah, you obviously are allowed to waive the Miranda rights, but I never would. I don't know why you would. You know, once you're arrested, the officers are not there to be your friends, although they'll be friendly to try to get you loosened up and chatty, right? I mean, this is all part of their... So, 4th Amendment, search warrants. 5th Amendment, right to remain silent. Don't have to give evidence against yourself. And 6th Amendment, right to an attorney. And that's it.
Thank you.